Thanks for coming. My name, if some of you might not know me, I'm Pepper, Jen Pepper. I'm the gallery director and I am a professor of studio art and teach some art history to some great students. So I welcome you to the biennial faculty show. It's a dynamite show with a number of our colleagues. It's always great to share our work with you. And you're going to get a chance to hear from the artists, makers of these pieces, of some of their creative process. And then we'll be mingling, and if you want to ask us more questions, please do. But I wanted to just tell you a couple of things before we begin the lecture, the artist talk. First of all, the next show is the big exciting show. This is the best show of the year. This is the juried student annual show. Happens every year in the spring. Any student, campus-wide can enter work. What you do is if you have, say, if you're a equine major and you're designing a dress, you would enter it through the fashion program. If you're VC, doing something digitally, you'd enter it through VC. Studio art and photo, you would enter it through us. So you just need to speak to those program directors or people in those areas of when that entry date is, etc. But the show itself will be as soon as we come back from our spring break, it will be going up the following Monday. So that'll be the opening. All right, so it's coming up really fast, and the exhibition, the gallery is full of fantastic work, floor to ceiling. It's a lot of fun. It's a really big excitement. We've got a checklist of all the art, etc., everything on the walls, and we always also do a gallery book with people's information, their bio, their artist statement, CVs, etc. So if you'd like to look at that, super duper. Last thing, I want to thank a number of people that this would not happen without them. First of all, Professor Corky Goss, where are you? You were right here. There he is. He does all of our lights and some of our high-hanging pieces. Who helped install the show was Emily Reese, if you'd like to come on over, and Caitlin Secondo. These are my gallery assistants that do a fantastic job. And Lily Damien, right? Who does the photography. So they do our Facebook pages, our Instagram pages, etc. They work behind the scenes very, very hard. So I want to thank you guys. You do a great job. And so each person's going to be speaking a little bit about their work. So I want to congratulate all my colleagues for fantastic work. Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to start with Alan Stewart. The videographer is just kind of going to move around with the artists to their areas. So if you can just kind of make a pass so she can film, okay, that'd be super. Thank you so much for coming.
Okay, folks, I have been working, my pieces are all done on the computer, and they're all done with Photoshop. I've been working with Photoshop since it had only one layer and no history. So the focus of these particular pieces is in some ways a response to what I find to be an overwhelmingly horrific political situation. So I'm interested in creating something that's beautiful, and that it talks about beauty, and it uses things like flowers and roses. These are images. I also teach history of graphic design, so I'm always looking for images that I have come across while teaching. Some of this stuff, like the two flowers, are from a folder at the Boston Public Library on chromolithography printed in 1880. The Greek vase is a neoclassical piece taken from an artist's rendition of something that was done at Pompeii. So in some ways my pieces are archaeological, right? It's got multiple layers, you can tease them apart. I clearly reference those kinds of images. They are becoming less and less crowded as I do more and more of this work. So formally I'm interested in color, and I'm interested in shape, and I'm interested in not so much me driving a narrative, but leaving it open enough with the images for you guys to sort of see what you like and construct your own kind of ideas. Any questions? Yes. Oh, you're waving. I've been doing, I probably have 50 of these, and I probably have 10,000 images that I look at when I put them together. So Okay, thank you.
Okay, this is a sculpture made by casting glass using the lost wax process. It's also my first experience mirrorizing a glass dome, which makes you feel like a chemistry scientist. It was quite fun and actually very difficult. But the entire piece is called Tipping Point, and there's a reference to climate change. The process of making kiln-formed glass is very much about heating and melting, which ties it kind of directly in terms of its form to climate change. So what is glass here, which is what you can see sticking out, and also what you can see illuminated inside, kind of hologram-like, it starts out as wax. I have a mold that I've made of a paper boat that I cast wax into, and then I also create a sheet of liquid wax, which I can kind of push up into forms that look kind of like ice caps that are melting, and then I can melt this wax boat into it or on those ice caps. And once I have this wax positive, I invest it in a variety of materials and put it in a kiln, evacuate all the wax, and then put it back in the kiln and fill that void with glass. And that process itself also takes about 7 days. It's a long process. And part of that has to do with bringing the glass back down to a temperature that it can exist in at room temperature without exploding, because there's a lot of internal tension. So the whole process seems to take a long time, right? But it's a relatively short time in the big picture of making form. And it's a really short time in terms of relating to climate change and the impact that the rise in temperature is having on the ice caps. So there's a connection there. And then I guess the final connection that I'd like to point out is that by putting it inside this mirrorized dome and illuminating it from underneath, it has this kind of hologram quality, like it's there and not there at the same time, which is, I believe, exactly where we're heading. Things aren't lasting long. And the final thing I want to say, I totally missed this. The little boat is a stand-in for humanity. It represents us.
This is actually a small part of an installation that I exhibited for the first time this past summer, which consisted of 2 large maps of the United States, one from 1966 and one from 2018. And so I used 16 different species of birds, that most of which were fairly common birds, and calculated their populations in 1966, calculated their populations now. And the now map had 38% of the birds that the old map had. So in like 50 years, we've lost, let's do the math here, guys. I'm an artist. 62% of those birds. And that's just 16 species. So around about 2011, 2012, I started working with the idea of extinct birds, birds that are no longer with us. And then I realized we are living through an extinction event right now. And these birds are disappearing before us, and something like an eastern meadowlark, which people who lived out in the countryside grew up with, they're disappearing, and they may not be here when your kids are around. And so I wanted to make that point, but by the same token, birds are wonderful, aren't they? Like, people have been coming up to me and saying, these birds are great, they make you happy, right? They're colorful, they're vivid, they move, they're so alive, and yet, due to human action, there are fewer and fewer of them, and they're less and less alive. And so I wanted to kind of have that contradiction where you're drawn in by these bright colors, and where then you are, hopefully, you'll read, Rufous hummingbird, 62% decline, right? Cerulean warbler, 75% decline. So you will understand what's happening, and hopefully we can do something about it. So I had these maps, and you're like thinking, these are not maps. Okay, so I made a legend for the map, because on the map, it's these birds, just these birds. You don't know what they are necessarily. But each one of these little collages showcases the bird with its name, so that if you fall in love with the bird on the map, you can come over here and say, oh, it's a Florida scrub jay. Okay, I get that. So which had like a 90% decline. So that's what I'm currently working with, is the declining populations of birds, and that's sort of a microcosm of the loss we are suffering across the planet. So another real joyous topic.
So this is my piece. It's not quite as cerebral as ice caps or birds, much more straightforward. But it's a result of a workshop that I took this summer. I'd gotten away from making and working with fabrics and textiles, and I wanted to start with quilting. And I had lots of fabrics, so I pulled out different pieces that I had and went up to the Adirondacks and sat along the lake with a view of the lake, and it was quite lovely, yeah. And so I started it, and it was a particular workshop because I always said that if I quilted, I'd never make circles or curves because they're hard to do. Sharon knows. So, but this one was a different technique. I went with the instructor who had developed this ruler that made it easy, and it was kind of fun. So I was able to sit there and put them all together. The biggest challenge was picking out the fabrics and what goes with what. And if you look closely, some of these are some batiks from Asia, some African tie-dye fabrics, and then some good old American calicos that were in it. So I put those all together, put the pieces, all the squares, the circles into squares, the squares all together, and then the stitching to hold all the layers is hand quilted, which was very calming and therapeutic. So I did that mostly outside, and the workshop I was able to just kind of start, learn the technique, and then continue on with it. So I brought it all home, and the good thing is I was able to finish it, finish the quilt and have it hanging here. So thank you.
Okay, so I think actually the story of why this piece exists is kind of interesting. Last May, the National Cartoonist Society held the NCS Fest, which is a large cartoon and comics festival, and it was in Huntington Beach, California. So the Huntington Beach Art Center hosted the Wonderful World of Comics, a large exhibition of cartoons and comics. And there was also a special exhibition that they put together honoring 90 years of Popeye. And King Feature Syndicate invited members of the National Cartoonist Society to create works in tribute to this occasion and gave us free rein to use any of the characters and icons from the strip. So after the exhibit, all the pieces were auctioned off with the proceeds going to the NCS Foundation, which is the charitable arm of the National Cartoonist Society. So I drew this piece in ink on marker paper, scanned it, and then colored it digitally, which is the way I do my regular cartoon work as well. This is one of 2 copies that I printed out. The other was exhibited at the show and auctioned off afterwards. So I've always loved the role that spinach played in the Popeye comics, so naturally I chose the can of spinach. And I had just seen an exhibit of Warhol work in Corning at the Rockwell Museum. So the mashup of the 2 influences was pretty easy to come by. I acknowledge the obvious influence of Andy Warhol as well as the longtime Popeye cartoonist Bugs Sagendorf and Popeye creator E.C. Seeger in my signature on the print.
Great.
So that's it.
Hey everybody, my name is Mary Beth Fiorentino, and this is a small selection of work from my master's, my body of work at my master's and since then. It essentially centers around the idea of, perseverance, and above all else, nature is best at that. So when I walk down to the beach with my dogs, I see big tree trunks like growing through, large boulders of a fence, for example. Nature doesn't let anything stop it. And so I like to really take cues from nature when I'm trying to accomplish something myself. I'm just gonna keep going. I'm just gonna persevere no matter what is seemingly in my way. So that's why you see a lot of forms that are protruding and proliferating. There's a lot of, pattern and kind of graphic forms, I think because of my design sensibility and my design work. These lighter pieces are sterling silver, and these are stainless steel that is covered in industrial white enamel. So I get these in pre-enameled sheets. So if you remember, maybe for the students like at your grandmother's house, steel basins that are covered in white, or like an old stove, let's say, that has little chips of the white coming off and there's little rusted pieces, that is enameled steel. And that's what these pieces are made out of. So I use the hydraulic press, I use obviously enameling of my own, and I enjoy making, link structures, particularly ones that are hidden and that kind of subvert expectation a little bit, so you're not really sure how the pieces link together or necessarily what it's made with, and that's what brought this body of work together. I'm also teaching next semester Monday, Wednesday night, 6 to 8:50. Well, that's signed up for my class. You could talk to some of the students from last fall. They made just some absolutely great work, and I will teach you some really basic metalsmithing skills, and you will be able to make an unending amount of pieces with what you will learn next fall.
So my work doesn't talk about the destruction of our planet as much as it talks about finding the hidden jewels that we many times just overlook. My favorite way of hiking or walking anywhere is I find myself ambling into the underbrush and looking at all of the shapes and forms and designs that nature has provided. And my favorite, obviously you can tell, one of my favorites is Queen Anne's lace. I love the delicacy of them, but they don't give in. You find them everywhere. One year I actually thought I should plant them in my flower garden, and it was a big mistake because they took over. So I don't do that anymore, but I just love the weeds that I see along the road. So what I have discovered, I'm an artist that works with fabric. I am traditionally a quilt maker, but have moved beyond quilt making. I've added to my quilt making skills by learning printmaking. And these were developed using a photopolymer process, which for anyone that's ever developed film, it's basically going into a dark room and putting the plant on a steel plate that's covered with photopolymer, and it's light sensitive, and then exposing it in a light box, and then rinsing off all the polymer. And basically what happens is it etches right into the metal. So now I have etchings. Instead of scratching away at the metal, this is done with a photographic process. You can also do the same process with photographs. These are direct images onto the plate and expose. Some of them I actually ink up the actual plants and run them through the press as well. And then once that's all done, before I even start, I hand dye all of the canvas and silk that you see. And once the print is done and dry, then I layer it, and then I go after it with my sewing machine to sew a bunch of the stems, and then handwork to add the delicate parts of the flowers. Then it's framed. So my work is starting to develop and adding this into my quilts too. I've only done 2 of them, so I can't wait to see what happens with this process. I found out that I am a process person. I love making things, and fabric, I've been a fabric artist since forever, but I've been working with fabric since I was a very little girl. I still love it today, so that's my work.
Okay.
Hello everyone, and this is a design commission. I've got my first commission back in 1982, so I've been doing commission work off and on for about 38 years. It happens to be a Fairport Masonic Lodge And the beauty about doing creative work for clients is they take you on an adventure that you may never have thought you would go on. In this case, it's sort of a historic adventure. Essentially Fairport, which is a small town near Rochester, New York, and it's a historical recreation about 1901 of Fairport. This is actual, based on historic photographs. This old hotel is gone, so I put it back in, and the rest of it's made up. It's called the Temple Inside. It is a Masonic temple, a converted theater building. The walls about 120 feet overall, and you can see it goes quite high. It's something like 30 feet, 25, 30 feet high. And this is because it was an old theater, and the proscenium and the old stage are still right here. So it's quite a large wall. And the big question is, what is this doing here? But I had to keep true to the site. So even though the wall, the site itself is where the color is, there is an actual roof right here. And this is obviously actual sky behind that roof. Couldn't not include it. I would have had to make this thing even larger to avoid that. So this is a commission that I'm delivering, hopefully to negotiate for the actual fabrication of the mural on site. And that's coming. This show actually forced me, like you guys know, to get it done. And I'll get it delivered in the spring. And wish me luck. I'll let you know what happens. Thank you.
This is her work, these beautiful prints. So I know that she would love to hear from you of what you think about them and if you have questions about them, because the process is so unbelievable. Just absolutely gorgeous work. So we will hear from Mike Brannon now, who is the Buddha eyes and the temple pieces.
So these are, I lived in Cazenovia College for 6 years while I worked at the American School. And this is a technique where you print on canvas, and then you essentially paint over it. I call it advanced painting by number. So I first got a wind of that technique through the HP labs. There was a gentleman showing how to use the equipment, and his initial recommendation was that you print on canvas, and then you go in with like black or white, and you enhance it with highlights, and then you put like Mod Podge over it and stretch it and put it on a canvas like this. So I did that for a couple photos I took, and they came out really good. And then I started thinking, well, what if I try to cover the whole thing? And that's where I got to this point. So this is a temple in Nepal. It's a Hindu temple up in the mountains. The three kingdoms in Kathmandu were the Kathmandu, Bhaktapur, and Patna. And this is right outside of Bhaktapur. And if you ever go there and you take a camera, you should take a camera, because every photo you take will be amazing. But everything is so darn old. So this temple is about, this is called the Chunu Narayan Temple, and it was built in 464 AD. And it's up in the mountains, and it overlooks the valley of Bhaktapur. And when you get off the bus, there's a pond there with, when I got off the bus, there was a pond there with water buffaloes swimming in the pond, and there was actually a kid playing in the pond with the water buffalo. And then you walk through this very feudal old village, and you walk up to the temple, and the people are out in the streets. It's like a brick street with a drain in the middle. And the kids are playing, and the people are drying their produce or whatever. And they're all out in the streets. You walk up to the temple, and you get there, and there's just this amazing temple. And you just wander. When I was there, you wander around. Now you have to pay to get into this area, which is kind of good because it helps upkeep the place. But one of the sad things is all around the temple are all these statues and these shrines that are hundreds of years old, and they're being, like thieves are coming in the night and stealing them and selling them on the black market. So there's all this like lost art that's disappearing from Nepal. So we spent the whole just wandering around and taking a lot of photos, and I have tons of photos of it. So this is a Hindu temple. It was dedicated to the Lord Vishnu, if you know who, if you follow Hinduism. So Nepal was one of the last Hindu kingdoms of the world. The king and his wife and his family got assassinated in 2001 when I was living there. The Maoists were very active, and they were they started getting very violent. So we were living there teaching at the American school, and we left in 2001. I believe now they have an elected government, but it's a very poor nation, but beautiful nation. It exists right above India and right below Tibet, which is really China. They call it the yam between the two stones because it's a small country. It's roughly 150 miles wide by like 50 miles. 50 miles wide, 150 miles long. It's so mountainous, it takes forever to get anywhere. So this, and what I did here is I found these great videos. So if you wanted to like see what it's really like here, you can get your QR code and you can watch the video. And they take you on a walking tour of this area. So it's really cool. You know, it used to cost like $1,600 round trip to get there. I don't know what it costs now, but if you don't have the $1,600, you can watch the video. You know. So this is another one. This is the Eyes of Buddha, and so they have these shrines. They're stupas, and the biggest shrine in Kathmandu it was in Bodhanath. They had these eyes painted on all four sides. And the idea is that they're all seeing, and they see everything. So they have this big stupa, which is a big shrine with that people walk around daily, and they have these little spinning wheels. So in the morning, or just about any time you go there, the Tibetan people are walking around and they're spinning the little air prayer wheels. And they just walk around, and some of them are doing prostrations all the way around. Some of them are humming, and they have their little beads. And they just walk around and walk in a clockwise motion. So the eyes represent all seeing. So typically you'll see like a different type of symbol in the middle here. So like this is considered like the internal eye. So the idea is let me read my notes here. The eyes consist of two different types of eyes. The first type are known as the third eye. So the third eye is here, and this is your inner dharma, meaning the inner world and your wisdom. So you see the world through your inner eyes, and you see the world through your outer eyes. And the world and your outer eyes are pretty dark. You know, people get caught up in the world, the material world, and they get depressed and they chase money, or you know, there's a lot of sadness. And the idea is that you have to have a balance, and you have to. I'm not Buddhist, by the way, but I live there, so you have to use your inner eye, which gives you wisdom. So my son and I, my son who's now going here, he's in the business program. We used to go there all the time on a Saturday, and they would have once a year they would have the Tibetan New Year's, and they would have like these big elaborate shows where all the monks would come out and have all the like old instruments, and they'd throw the sampa, which is like a grain, and they would also have like these huge horns that they would blow. It was quite amazing. So my son and I would always go there every year, and he was a little guy, and I would put him on my shoulders, and we'd walk around and check all the things out, spin the wheels, climb up on the stupa, and it was just a wonderful time. So I would always take tons of photos there. And again, if you want to see it, you can do a tour, a video tour, and you'll see all the people walking around, all the Tibetans there. There was a movie, The Little Buddha, with Keanu Reeves. So there's a part where he's running through the stupa area, and you see all the people. It's funny, in that movie, it was all filmed in Kathmandu. So he is in different parts of the city. But unless you knew that, you know, he's in one kingdom 1 second, and then he's running through Bodnat the other second, and then he's running through here the other second. And it was just kind of amazing to see it. So these are photos that I do in the summer. What I do is I spend 10, 15 minutes, and I paint a little, I mix the paint, I check it out on the canvas, and then I get back to work. It's a nice little break. Actually, this one took me a long time. I think I finished it last week. It sat around for a long time, and I finally figured, well, I can't do much more to it, so let's just wrap it up and put the Mod Podge on it and stretch it over the weekend. That was always a challenge. Anyway, I do that for fun. I don't do it for money. And I do it so I can show the students that you too can print on canvas and then just paint over it.
I'm going to be really short and quick. You could always ask me more questions. So I'm Jen Pepper, and we all wear many hats, obviously, but one of the reasons why I was hired here was I'm an artist and to work with students in foundation, etc. So a lot of my own work, you can check it out on my website if you'd like. You will probably kind of start seeing, or hopefully seeing, this idea of accumulation. I do a lot of things with accumulation, and I also do a lot of things, so I'm so excited to see so much fiber product here. That I do things in fiber, I'm a weaver, I'm a stitcher, I do all sorts of things, but I often do things that are kind of fiber related with unusual materials. So I was very fortunate, my dear friend who I was hoping was going to be here today, Dave Harper, he's a sculptor that lives in the area, and he knows that I'm an accumulator, and he said, Pepper, I have about 600 feet of antique fire hose that has never been used. Would you like it? And I said, yes, without even seeing it. I would. He said, well, it's a little dirty. It's been in my barn. It came from a building that he was working with other architects in New York City, and they were going to throw it away. So if you notice the printing on it, they're from 1972, and some are 73, and some are actually before the Summer of Love, 1962. So they are 50 some odd years old. They're linen. And so when I said to him, yes, I want to do this, and he had just given them to me, and I said, I'm going to make this happen. And so when I got them, they're super, super hard. They're like almost, you could knock on them, right? And I had to wash them. They're linen. They're all woven. And then I knew exactly what I wanted to do with them to create this kind of pair of legs with socks that I love to travel. There are Scandinavian socks. And it's this idea of kind of being grounded and not grounded at the same time. I like that slippage all the time. And I call it soft stripe. Okay, so stripes have just fallen off paintings, art historical paintings, off the wallpaper, and just gone to the ground. So I do have more that I need to wash. And so it's gonna probably creep out even further. But the other piece that I've done, this is kind of like for me, what did I call it? I call it I Am Love Letters from Art History. So I love to work not only with fiber and accumulation, but I love the idea of language and how language works and how what we do with language. And so what these pieces are, a lot of my own sketchbooks are just filled with language now. They don't, sometimes they have little drawings in them, but a lot of times they are just kind of my thoughts as I'm going by. So what each one of these is kind of like a quilt square. I'm working on actual printed fabric. It's the language itself is machine embroidery. And I was a painter right through grad school, and I consider myself a painter still. I just do stuff in space. And I've really been wanting to work with glitter. I love it. I'm really getting fond of glitter and that idea of what glitter can do. Shift like this, right? Shift. And so, one of them is Fur-Lined Teacup, which is a piece by Merit Oppenheim from the Dada artist. It's a teacup that has been fur-lined in deerskin. And it sits in the Museum of Modern Art, and that's always been one of my favorites, still today. I love it to death. This piece, MoMA for My Eyes, people's names carved into things, vivid exhibition, thoughtful and pure. So it's just these kind of like synapses that I have when I see things, I write them down, call them what you wish. But the idea that language grounds us, and it also keeps us very buoyant. And I just wanted to read, so all these pieces are kind of, the language that I have on them are kind of noting a piece, like the, Garden of Earthly Delights. This is about hard edge painting. This piece, and you can't see it, but it had language in it about how a painting cannot be seen from the back. So it's that idea of illusion and being there and not being there. And one of my massive heroes is a photographic critic, Roland Barthes, and his idea of the punctum. And I hope some of you might know what the punctum is, but if I can just quickly say, this is what it is to him. The punctum is what was unique to the photograph. According to Barthes, what was its punctum, which he defined as a sensory, intensely subjective effect of a photograph on the viewer. The punctum of a photograph is that accident which pricks me, but also bruises me, is poignant to me. So that just concept of what he was talking about is how I kind of move through the world, maybe, and how I think about my own work, as that these things that kind of hit me, bruise me, are poignant to me, and then fly away. So that's it.